Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay. Never comes again, another day like yesterday. Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.
Good morning, everybody. Haven't done an episode. I have a flurry of episodes, haven't done one for a minute. So I'm going to jump back in. I'm trying new lighting without the overhead lighting back here. And it looked really good, but then the light coming from outside the window was shining off of my glasses, which messed it up. So then I closed the blinds, and it's a little bit better. Whatever. I'll have to compare. So this is a point that I've touched on before amongst other subjects, but this will be the primary subject. And it is about the value of clinical, psychological, pathological information, ideas, and scaffolding around the human experience. A book that would be really interesting to read if you're really deep into this subject is Thomas Szasz. I think it's S-Z-A-Z, something like that. The Myth of Madness. And from his perspective, the danger of psychology and therapy is that it slowly and unconsciously becomes a control function for society to say the people who have behaviors, personalities, energies that are uncomfortable for us, then we start naming those and pathologizing them, calling them mental illness so that we can unconsciously control these people, right? People who are more violent and aggressive than other people, rather than just going, wow, that's really uncomfortable, but that's a normal part of the human experience. There are those kinds of people. Sometimes in history, they're very useful to us, but they make us uncomfortable. Suddenly it's antisocial personality disorder. People who are much more paranoid and anxious, and maybe their cautiousness helps us, and sometime in history when things are very fraught, suddenly they have generalized anxiety disorder or they have PTSD, whatever, right? So his assertion, he goes as far as to almost imply that schizophrenia could be included as something that's not necessarily a mental illness. But I don't go that far, but I definitely can see that there's a couple things that psychological concepts can be damaging. They can be used to control. It's super, super easy. It's a very slippery slope. A couple things that you need to know about, right? If you're a therapist and you refer to the DSM-5, which is the manual of all of the quote-unquote officially sanctioned and described mental illnesses, right? So insurance uses this. Doctors use this. Therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists use this to go, is this actually a mental illness, or are you just struggling in the human condition? And there's a list of symptoms, and there usually has to be some. If there's 10 symptoms, usually you have to have 7 out of 10. If there's 5, you have to have 3 out of 5 of the symptoms. And what's really interesting about it is that one primary descriptor amongst every single one of those is it has to significantly interfere with your activities of daily living, your ADLs, which is another way of psychology or therapy saying it becomes a mental illness when it begins destroying your ability to live at all. So if somebody is really aggressive and angry, but they have enough of a hold on it that they're just an uncomfortable person, they can work their job, they're not hitting their kids, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, well, that's really uncomfortable. There's maybe something there to work on, but that's not necessarily a mental illness. If someone, people can be profoundly paranoid and function. There are even people, social media influencers, who make enormous amounts of money off of just a sort of paranoid but intelligent ability to connect any dots to create some conspiracy theory, and they're legitimately paranoid, but they work a job and they know better than to bring that into their job, and they have fairly realistic reality testing in enough areas of their life that that paranoia doesn't destroy them, whereas we begin calling it a mental illness when it's at the point that someone is like, I can't eat because someone sneaks into my home at night and poisons the food. And I can't take my medication because my medication is being used to control me. The government's actually using my medication to control me, blah, blah, blah. So at that point, that person can't live, right? Oh, my water's poisoned. Well, are they going to stop drinking water? So it's interesting that the mental health field really decides that something is a quote-unquote legitimate mental illness once someone is in a downward spiral where the way they think and the way they feel interferes with their ability to live at all. Now, this is very interesting because there are people who are very stubbornly resilient who, say, may suffer depression far worse than someone else. I'll give you for example. When I look back on the depressions I experienced, many of those depressions were so profound that I could no longer think. I'm very good with language, but I would look at a sentence and be unable to read it and retain the meaning literally seconds after or while I was reading it. I was so flooded with shutdown and cortisol and blah, blah. It was a function of severe PTSD. Well, that's very, very severe. But I also was raised in a very, very resilient, very stubborn culture. And I just kept functioning and pushing through and functioning and pushing through until I could solve the problem. Sometimes you can see, for example, kids raised in wealthy environments where they have lots of problems solved for them, and they'll have like medium level of depression and they fall apart. And their depression is maybe not as bad as someone else's, but because they've never been forced to develop. I was forced to. I left home at 19. I was forced to make sure that I ate. There was no alternative. I had to go to a job and work it no matter what the job was. Right? But young people who have been in an environment where they've never really connected to what it is as a human animal to fight for survival, they'll have a mild to medium depression and it will completely destroy them, and they're just sitting up all night playing video games and drinking with their friends and not going to job interviews and not going to university, and they really look like a mess. But their actual depression may not be as severe. So their dysfunction comes out of an entire family system dysfunction of hamstringing your kids by overly solving problems for them and not letting them face into very difficult challenges. So this all gets very complex, and I'm gonna do the shorthand for you, or I'm gonna simplify it for you. The DSM-5 isn't a medical hard science. It's not like they can look at someone's brain scan and chemistry and body chemistry and blah, 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 and go, okay, this is literally what depression is physiologically. I mean, we're getting much closer. You can see correlates of what it is. A shutdown left prefrontal cortex, a paucity of dopamine action, serotonin action, right? There are things where you can see correlates. But really what happens is they just describe a group of behaviors and reported feelings and then observable behaviors. The person reports, I feel super depressed. And then you observe that they're not doing well in life and they're not able to make their own food and they just lay in bed all day. It's like, well, that there could be choice in that or not. There's no way to prove that. So what I'm saying is diagnoses are not factual hard science. Mental health diagnoses are a combination of a self-report of how someone feels and how something functions, and observable behaviors. Well, that's a reasonable, I mean, that's kind of what we're all going off of anyway and interacting with each other. That's not unreasonable, but that's not hard science. It's not like, oh, freezing point is this. There's a rule for that. There's observable phenomena. It's very, very predictable, and it's going to happen that way every time. Again, with the example that I gave you, that's not true with humans, right? You can have somebody who was severely depressed. I was severely depressed, but because of the culture I grew up in, I didn't know anything else. I didn't grow up in a culture where people killed themselves. That wasn't an idea. Kids didn't go around being depressed and emo. Like, that wasn't a thing. You would get your ass kicked. You fought through and you suffered and you went, well, that's what life is, and that's what, you're a strong person and a good person if you fight through, right? So I grew up in that culture, so the activities of daily living wasn't an issue. That never went away. So the point is that this is way too complex to say that this is a fixed thing. A mental illness is not a fixed thing. On the other hand, the person is having a very real, very significant experience, and it's very consistent with other people having that same experience, right? So here's where mental health diagnoses and the idea of them as a fixed thing can be very helpful. I had suffered with really severe PTSD the entirety of my childhood and my young adulthood into middle adulthood. And I just thought there was something wrong with me. Now, of course, I had very gaslighting and shaming parents, and my mother had spent my entire childhood telling me that it was just me, and denying and negating the experiences that a therapist would be like, well, of course you had PTSD if you experienced that, right? But I just thought it was me. So I, in addition to having PTSD, I was overwhelmingly felt ashamed of myself and felt that there was something wrong with me, that there was just inherently something wrong with me, that I was a weak person, I was a shameful person, I was a silly person, whatever it was. And so here's one of the big useful functions of mental health diagnoses. When I began reading and studying, like before I ever became a therapist, like a decade before, I bought the DSM-5 and I read and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, if these things are things. And it was enormously relieving to see this list of descriptions go, oh my God, it's not just me. I have this condition. And it was enormously relieving to go, this is a thing. And other people have this. People who come back from war have this. People who are abused as children have this. People, right? And so suddenly it also validated that, no, you really did experience what you experienced, however much your parents lie about it. You did. And they're lying about it because they feel ashamed that they did it, right? So having a DSM diagnosis can be tremendously relieving for people who have struggled desperately with these overwhelming barriers to thriving, and that's what they are. They're barriers to thriving. It can be tremendously relieving to feel that you understand yourself and that there are people, mental health therapists and other people in society, who understand what you're going through and don't blame you and don't think there's something bad about you or shameful about you because you're struggling with this, any more than someone would go, oh, you broke your leg and you have a limp. Like, no one's going to shame you for that, right? It can be tremendously relieving. For some people, they grew up with parents who used the idea of mental illness to shame and control them. And so for them, when you diagnose them, they feel ashamed and they hate it and they don't ever want to hear it, right? So here's this complexity. But let me come to the point. This wasn't, as per usual, I get into the complexity of the thing, but it wasn't really the point of this episode. So I don't want to go on too long. I just want to make the point that mental health diagnoses are just a description of reported emotional experiences alongside behavioral outcomes And both of those are somewhat subjective, but they happen so consistently, and the description of them is so consistent that it becomes valuable to go, well, let's just say this is a thing. This person's having an experience that has some cause in their physiological, whatever caused the physiological outcomes, they're having a physiological outcome called PTSD, and it has these descriptors and it has these outcomes. So however complex that is or malleable it is, it's common enough and consistent enough that it's worth it to us to name it. That's all mental health diagnoses are. We're naming a group of observable behaviors that is extremely problematic for the person to function within society, or pretty problematic, and accompanied with their report of how they feel or their psychological experiences. That's all it is. Okay? It's not like 0 degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit, whichever it is, I forget, is the freezing point of water. It's not like that. It's much more malleable, but it's consistent enough across the human experience that it's worth naming it. That's what we've done. Okay. So you have to be very careful with mental health diagnoses. It's not entirely a hard scientific thing. It's a naming of a thing. And there are ways that it can go wrong. There are ways that it can hurt people. That's what it means to pathologize someone, which is to constantly, instead of take what they're reporting to you seriously, or if someone comes and complains to me and goes, John, you're like this and that, and I feel sad after I talk to you, and I'm just like, well, you just have depression. Well, I'm just using the pathology, the description of a mental health issue, to avoid responsibility for the fact that I'm making someone sad. Right? That's what pathologizing means. I said, oh, well, it's not really that I make you sad, it's that you have a problem with depression. Right? That was the entirety of my childhood, was my mother doing really egregiously abusive things, and then instead of taking responsibility for those things, going, oh, well, he's mentally ill. Well, he's super sensitive. Well, he's just a musician who his brain is different, right? The whole point of that, it wasn't that she had studied the DSM-5 or knew anything about psychology. She was just using the idea of psychology to pretend that there was something wrong with me, that I was born this way, that completely erased her responsibility for very abusive behaviors and extremely negligent behaviors on her part. Right? So that's what pathologizing means. So I am talking about how mental health diagnoses get used, and I'm going to talk about a more subtle case. Okay? And this is not one where other people pathologize you. This is one in which I see people who use mental health issues in other people to avoid a very painful truth. And this happens a lot in families around alcoholism or addiction. It happens a lot around families where there's severe depression, PTSD, or anxiety that has a major impact on the family, and where there may be a number of siblings who have different experiences. And I'll describe my own use of this and how I saw this in myself, but I see it in clients all the time. Clients who will come in who had mild to medium to extremely abusive parents, negligent parents, and the clients will spend a lot of time talking about what their parents experienced as children and their mental health diagnosis. So they're pathologizing their parents, but they're not with the purpose of avoiding responsibility because they're the children who were abused. But I'll give my own anecdotal experience, or my own experience in my own life, and then I'll describe it more clinically. I was what's considered the no-good child for a borderline mother, a pretty sociopathic mother. And what that means is not that you were a bad child, but that kind of mother has such a black and white view of reality that she will make some child the ideal all good child, and they can do no wrong no matter what they do, and the no good child can do no right no matter what they do. And I was a good child. I was a really sweet kid, wanted to get along with everybody, super loyal to the family. 90% of my problematic behaviors came from having PTSD from a very young age and from being badly abused by my mother. Now, I did shitty things that kids do. I was a normal kid too. Coming back to the point, what direction was I going with that? Oh, okay. So my mother and my father, the point of telling you that I was a no good child is to tell you that I was the recipient, clearly the recipient of very significant abuse, far more than any of my other siblings, though no one has ever admitted that. My oldest sister was abused pretty badly and mistreated, but everyone kind of knew that, and my parents were willing to cop to it. But most of the things that happened to me were done by my mom, and they were done when other people were not around. In addition to that, the things that she did while other people were around, she just straight lied, reframed, and convinced everybody that I was crazy, mentally ill, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So I come out of that relationship. I left home at 19, having been significantly abused and having really severe outcomes. And over time, realizing, my parents are significantly, especially my mother, is significantly emotionally disturbed. And that she is, in fact, by pretty reasonable definition, pretty sociopathic. Or she was in relationship to me. To the point that she was willing to destroy my life and destroy my relationship to my siblings with no compunction whatsoever. None. My father, I think, struggled with how he behaved, but he never changed how he behaved. His uncomfortable feelings were not enough for him to change how he saw me or how he related to me. So I spent years, easily a decade, talking about what my parents had grown up in, talking about my mother as a borderline personality disorder, although she doesn't entirely fit all of the definitions. It's a lot more sociopathic than borderline. She's way less emotionally dramatic than a lot of borderlines. She's much sneakier and much smarter about how she manipulates than borderlines tend to be. And talking about my dad, and my dad had revealed quite a few things about his childhood. He had been molested by cousins and relatives down the street who were raping their daughter and making the sons participate in it, and all my dad said was, well, they did stuff to us too. He didn't say what it was, but, right, he's basically saying, look, I was molested as a child. And there were a lot of other really horrible things that he went through. And so I spent a decade really analyzing, and feeling super, super hurt, trying to explain my parents' behavior, and feeling super, super hurt because they were not terrible parents to my youngest brother, my second youngest brother, and to my sister just above me. The two oldest kids, the oldest son and the oldest daughter, they abused badly, and they abused me, or at least my mom abused me, definitely the worst out of all of them. I was her target for control. And it would really, really hurt as I watched my parents kind of not be great parents, but take care of my siblings. That just hurt so bad. And the way I solved it was to feel ashamed, or was to feel like, well, there must have been something about me, or maybe they were abusive, but maybe I really am difficult, blah, blah, blah. And to watch them, not be great parents, but attend to, take care of, offer money, be present for, etc., at some level, care about, ask about, when neither one of them ever asked anything about me, especially not once I started talking about what they did, right? I became literally just not a person. And I know that that's not how they talked about it in the family, because they did everything they could to convince my brothers and sisters that they were concerned and so heard about what was going on and wanted it, but not one of them ever called me in, I think it was like 10 to 15 years that we were estranged. Not one of my parents ever called and said, how do we work this out? So whatever they were saying to my brothers and sisters was just bullshit to make them look not bad. Not once did they attempt to repair or even try to understand, right? And so I really struggled, like that hurt really badly, but I would never go into it and go, what does this mean? So let's come to the point. About 10 years in, watching my parents in general become more and more loving, more attuned. They worked hard. They worked hard to kind of be present. My dad, who I am firmly convinced was on the spectrum, and I think he came to understand that there was something about him that wasn't just trauma, that there was something, he really didn't get social complexities. He was very rigid, very linear, though he understood intellectual complexity at a level that many people considered him a genius. And I watched him work on this stuff with my siblings and get better. And it kept hitting me over and over and over. Okay, let's say they're badly mentally ill and emotionally disturbed. You know, they had all of these experiences, and I knew some of what my mother had grown up in, and right, so there's some scaffolding around, blah, blah, blah. But here's the problem with pathologizing and making everything about emotional dysfunction and psychological disorders and DSM-5 diagnoses. Here's the truth that many, 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 many people who grow up with complex PTSD, who grew up with abusive parents, who gaslit them, targeted them, etc., here's the truth that we all struggle with, that it took me a long time to actually just admit. It may be true that my mother struggles with empathy. She's not like Dexter. It's not like, I can't wait to go out and kill. She literally is scared by the fact that she knows she's not capable of feeling the things that most people feel, especially in relationship to me. And because I was deeply empathetic, I think that was very disturbing to her. So she's not walking around happy, but she really struggles to understand how people feel about things. She's just not empathetic. She's deeply attached to her own needs, and that's it, end of story. Right? I get into descriptions and then I forget the direction that I'm going. So I could wrap myself up in all of these things. But the truth that I was avoiding is, no matter their dysfunction or not, they had chosen, they were okay with abandoning me. They were okay with me going away for 10 to 15 years. For life. The only reason I went back and made any contact at all, I saw them twice after I cut off contact. One was when my oldest sister Christine died, and I loved my older sister Christine, and she and I had stayed in contact, and I was not going to not go to her memorial because of my parents. I wasn't going to let them interfere with that, so I went. And the second time I saw them was I visited my sister and my brother-in-law with my kids, who had moved into my parents' house, and my parents were now living in the guest house on the property because my father was struggling with dementia. My parents were getting much older, and I just sort of spent 3 or 4 hours there before taking off again. So twice. So other than that, other than me choosing, they were okay with never seeing me again, especially my mother. totally okay with never seeing me again, as long as it meant there was a very good chance that my siblings and no one in the community would ever get a chance to actually hear what she had done. And so, in other words, she was okay. Like, that was, or maybe she wasn't okay. Maybe it hurt, but it was definitely, she had no problem allowing that to happen. She never reached out once, not once. Now, my father did a couple times, but he didn't reach out in a real way. He reached out in a way that was like, the message is clear. Come back as the mentally ill person who admits that he's a mess and we love you. It wasn't like, okay, we have a conversation that needs to be had about the way we treated you when you were a kid. Right? So he didn't really, but he at least reached out. So in truth, what I was avoiding by pathologizing and analyzing and obsessing about what they had grown up in and who they were, and a lot of it was anger. You know, my mother's a borderline and my father's a narcissist, and okay, that's great. But if you're that person who's taking up your time in therapy, going on and on about your parents and how mentally ill they are and what they grew up in, and alternating between feeling really sad for them because they grew up in that and you really do understand it, and being angry because the way they acted was so sick and you understand that they're mentally ill, blah, blah. Okay, all you're doing is avoiding one difficult truth, which is they chose at some point to not love you. Now, I'm going to say something that you don't have to agree with and lots of people will disagree with. People love to go on this thing of like, well, they loved you as best they were able and with the tools that, shut the fuck up. It's fucking stupid. Parents allow themselves to not love their children. They make choices. They make fucking choices. And nobody wants to admit it because they want you to forgive them, and but you can't adequately heal. You cannot completely heal if you have been targeted and gaslit and treated differently. Look, if my parents had treated all of us the same and fucked everything up and been horrible parents, you could go, look, that was just their skill level. But they clearly had a vastly different skill level with 3 other kids. It was not a lack of ability. They chose to allow it to go that direction with my older sister and especially with me because they were fucking okay with it. They chose to allow themselves not to love me in any significant way. And that's profoundly frightening, extremely painful. It comes with tons of grief. So right now I'm going to talk to the people who have complex trauma, who are struggling in therapy, who have struggled their entire lives with this thing where they're like, you're a smart person, you're intellectual, you understand modern psychology. Even therapists will explain to you, well, but you know, if you understand your mother grew up with this and blah, blah, maybe it's time to forgive her. Shut the fuck up. Do not let those people talk to you. They are not helping you because there is a truth that you need to get to. There's a truth inside you that's anchoring you in the PTSD and the complex PTSD. There's a truth that's anchoring you into all of that insanity and all of the incidences that you do EMDR to desensitize your response to the fact that your father lost his shit and smacked you across the face, or they locked you in a closet and left you there for whatever the fuck ever it is. You can do EMDR. I am an attachment-focused EMDR practitioner. I'm not putting it down. It's immensely effective. That's great. But there's this one truth in the middle of it that keeps you anchored in the pain and suffering, and that is the simple truth that your mental health, their mental health, psychological disturbance, their abuse as child, blah, 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 is all a distraction from the fact that they chose to allow themselves not to love you. And you were not loved by your parents. And they can lie because they care about what they look like. They may even care about what you think of them. They may care about what they think of themselves, but they didn't love you. My parents didn't love me. They loved my brother James. They loved my sister Beth. I think they had some kind of feelings of love for my sister Christine because she stayed in contact, whatever. I don't know. I mean, neither one of them shed a tear at her memorial. Not one. My mom sat there with like a half smile on her face And my dad just sat there. Maybe he was like, whatever. I don't know what they're feeling. But this same woman went to my cousin's funeral and put on this big demonstration, put on this big act of going to hug the mother of my cousin's child who had not been significantly involved in years, and pretended she was comforting her, and my mother shook and wept and tears poured down her face. It was all a performance for me. She didn't shed a single tear at my sister's funeral. Nor did she ever betray not one iota of discomfort at inflicting extreme emotional and sometimes physical pain on me. And when I suffered the mental health outcomes of that kind of behavior, there was not one iota of discomfort. Not one bit. She was uncomfortable that I would talk about it. She was uncomfortable that I would accuse her. She was uncomfortable that maybe anyone would ever find out. But not one hint of empathy or care in her face. Now, you can say anything you want about mental health, blah, blah, blah. But she hurts a little bit when my brothers and sisters hurt, and she worries about them. She would even, before I cut her off, call me to say, what should we do about this? Or what do you think about this person, blah, blah, blah. She had genuine, at least some stirrings of empathy for my siblings, but she had none, zero with me. That's just a fact. So you can call it anything you want. You can name it anything you want. But a core struggle and pain that people with complex trauma who had abusive parents and negligent parents who targeted them, not just a shitty parent who's shitty across the board, but who targeted them and treated them differently than their other siblings, the thing that keeps you anchored, no matter how many memories you desensitize, which really does help, but the thing that keeps you anchored and feeling like a victim and struggling in relationship to your childhood is people telling you to forgive your parents and that they tried the best they could and they really did love you in their own way. And no, they didn't. No, they didn't. And that's okay. You can forgive them anyway. You can forgive them at a human level, but you cannot heal as long as therapists and well-meaning friends and family and blah, blah, keep bullshitting you and telling you, you know what, if you understand what they grew up in, I'm sure that they actually did love you. They just were not able to. Shut the fuck up. You are not helping me and those other people square with what this is. Because we didn't grow up with parents who were just kind of bad and horrible. This is an alcoholic who treats all of his kids badly and never shows up for anybody's games and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that person is kind of doing what he or she is doing just across the board. But those of us who grew up with parents who are deeply narcissistic, sociopathic, et cetera, will use one child or one or two children out of a group of children to cut off and to hurt and abuse and to reject and to make the receptacle for all of the family's dysfunction and to dump all of the accusations on them. The parents are sick, but they will constantly accuse that child of being sick. That's not because they love them and just don't know how to do it differently. They don't love them. And it's okay. That's not a traumatized child protesting, oh, she doesn't love me. When I was a traumatized child, I was like, I thought she loved me. But that was the fucking problem, is there was a significant disconnect. And even therapists are trying to manipulate you into forgiving people and going, yes, they did love me. No, they didn't. They didn't and they don't. Because they could do something about it. And they don't. They could do something about it and they don't. And they are capable of doing something about it. So now I want to give you the evidence, right? Because you're at risk of going, oh, John's sharing his own childhood and he's hurt and he's angry at his parents and he's just lashing out, blah, blah, blah. No. I'm telling you clinically, and I'll tell you why. Here, take a let's just use a stereotype. I apologize, men, that this is a stupid stereotype because there are as many women who are this, but this is a stereotype that everyone gets. An alcoholic father, narcissistic, self-absorbed in his own mess, and he could stop drinking. It's super, super hard. I've worked in addiction treatment. It's very, very hard, but people do it, and they do it when they decide to do it. There is no technique. Techniques help people recover from addiction, but the only thing that starts the process is the person deciding to heal from addiction. Right? They have to decide to do it. So on one hand, you have this father who spends 20 years going, oh, I know I was a horrible father. I'm sorry. Like, well, I really do love you, and I want to do better, blah, blah, blah. You have no idea how many texts and emails clients bring in to let me read because some full of shit narcissist is trying to manipulate them again when they're 27 and go, I know I did a bad job. Shut the fuck up, then apologize and own your shit and show up differently. Stop going, I want to try. Oh, shut the fuck up. That's so full of shit. Anybody who says, I want to try to be better is full of shit. They don't, and they're not going to. People who want to do better and get it wrong and try again and get it wrong and try again. Okay? So there's this father who spends 20 years, 30 years through his children's lifetime and their young adulthood, periodically coming back, and then he'll go back to his friends and be like, I tried, and they're so mean. Like, I know I was bad, but I've done my best. No, you haven't done your best. You're full of shit. You're doing the same thing that you did when you were a kid. You're still drinking. You're still narcissistic. You're still making everything about you, and you're pretending you give a shit, and you're pretending that you're going to show up, but you're not, and they fucking know it. Okay? There's that person who has an alcohol problem, which is a very difficult problem. Let's take the same father, a template over here, who has an alcohol problem, entirely fucks up his children's life across the board, doesn't show up for any games, is verbally abusive, comes home sloppy drunk, blah, blah, and then kind of half cleans up in their 20s, and then realizes, I'm full of shit. I'm a fucking asshole. It's not these kids' job to hear my apologies. It's not these kids' job to register, I really want to try. That's not their fucking job. It's their job to grow up and learn to thrive and to be loved by their parents. And if you're not showing up in a loving, present way, you don't give a shit. Okay, so that father's going to fail over and over, but he keeps going after it and keeps going after it. And he does a little bit better, and they kind of trust him, and then he ends up drinking and shows up at his daughter's wedding a little soused and inappropriate. He doesn't send an email going, so sorry, I have struggled with this terrible thing, blah, blah, like, I really do love you, I'm sorry about what I did, but I'm just trying to be present in your life. That's all fucking lies and bullshit. Because the person who actually intends it fucking fights and fights and fights. If it takes them 5 years, if it takes them 8 years, if it takes them 10 years, their kids can see them making slow incremental improvements and showing up a little bit more and a little bit more. Without excuses, without, oh, this alcoholism is so difficult and I know you don't deserve it, but shut up. That's all narcissistic, self-serving bullshit. The only thing that shows that you love your child is that you actually show up present, not drunk, and making it about your child, not about you, not about how you struggle, not about how hard it is, not about how badly you want to be a good father, but actually show up. You show up at the wedding, you're not drunk. You sit there quietly, you're pleasant, you're respectful, and you go up and you hug your daughter and you're like, sweetie, I wasn't there for you, but I just want to tell you right now, I love you so much. And don't go on a long diatribe about how bad you feel. That's about you again. Just hug her and go, I'm going to be here for you And if you have kids, I want to be their grandfather if you will give me permission. I'm going to show up for you for the rest of my life. That's what I'm going to do. I love you so much. Hug, move the fuck on. Don't give some big sentimental, sappy, poor me bullshit. Right? So there's that father who has the equal level of alcoholism, had exactly the same shitty childhood. But that father does it because he loves his kids, and this father doesn't because he fucking doesn't love his kids. You can say anything you want about why, and he doesn't love himself. Man, shut up. You hurt people by taking the abusers and forcing the victim of the abuse to be more empathetic to the abuser than they are to themselves. Okay, so again, I'm talking to you. People like myself. And by the way, my therapist didn't do that. She wasn't full of shit. Never. She just kept gently inviting me to really see who my parents were. That's all. So I'm super, super lucky that I had a therapist who wasn't full of shit. I'm talking to you folks who have complex PTSD, who were targeted by narcissistic, sociopathic, deeply emotionally disturbed people who were also anxious, also PTSD, also depressed, or whatever. You add it all. Maybe there was addiction, maybe alcoholism, what the fuck ever. I don't care. But you were targeted, and then you watched that parent slowly, incrementally get better and be better with other people, but not with you. You hear me? I watched my parents get slowly, incrementally better with my siblings and with my siblings' kids, but not with me. They continued to be condescending, narcissistic, dismissive, and they continued to lie. I mean, lie at a profound level. Right? I've shared before that one of the things that my mother did was between 5 and maybe 7, or maybe it was 6 and 8, whatever. There was a period of time where the pain of whippings may not have functioned anymore. I don't know what it was. And she started on this slow progression of forcing me to pull down my pants to be whipped, and then forced to take my pants off. And then ultimately it turned in, she would force me to entirely strip naked, everything, no underwear. I was not allowed to put my hands in front of my private parts. I had to stand with my hands at my side while she lectured me about how I should be ashamed of getting beat up by my sister. Well, she was saying that I was fighting with my sister, but my older sister was tormenting me and beating the crap out of me. Okay, so she's lying about stuff like that. Not gray area shit. She's lying about stuff like that. It is a conscious choice on her part to go, fuck this kid. I would rather hide what I did. That is not someone who loves their child, right? I have a child, my oldest, my first child, I've made significant mistakes with that make me get choked up when I think about how fucking stupid I was and still traumatized, whatever. I don't give a shit who I have to tell. If my child has to go to therapy, like some of those things she was young enough that she probably wouldn't remember and wouldn't know, that I know that it factors into why she's as anxious as she is. I don't give a shit. I will go tell the therapist I did this because I want my child to know that if she has a problem with anxiety, there's nothing wrong with her. I was a fucking idiot and did stupid things and was not a good father with my first child. I don't give a shit because I love her. I don't give a fuck. I love her. I don't give a shit who knows. I love her. I want her to be okay. My mother doesn't love me. she would only have a relationship with me if I participated in lying about something as significant as her forcing me to strip naked for years as punishment and control, and I have to lie about that and about what the outcomes were for that. And I have to pretend that any outcomes were my fault because I'm mentally ill, blah, blah, blah. That's the contract. That's not a parent who loves their child. So all you people who are on about forgiving, and if you really shut the fuck up. And I don't mean that like, oh, you shouldn't forgive. I forgive my mother, like whatever. I'm just not interested in pretending that she loves me. It doesn't help me. So for all you complex PTSD people, well-meaning people, including many therapists, are going to go on and they're going to help you obsess about what your parents grew up in and their mental health diagnosis and why it drives them to behave this way or that way. And it's really not that they didn't love you. They were using the tools that they had. They were doing the best they could. In your head, you need to tell those people to shut the fuck up, because you watched those same parents defy all those limitations to be kind to other people. I watched my father be profoundly kind and connected to other people as long as it made him look good in the community. I watched my father attend to people, advise people, spend hours with people, helping them, listening to them, giving them advice, when he couldn't be bothered to piss in my direction. So he clearly had the skills, right? So you people who keep trying to convince people who watch this, watch their parents display that they do have the skills, and explain it like, well, you know, you have this personality characteristic and maybe your parent failed this. So shut up, you're not helping. Because what we have to deal with is we have to square with the intense grief and feelings of abandonment of actually putting away all the other noise, all the psychological mumbo jumbo, all the DSM-5 diagnoses, and we have to admit that our parents didn't fucking love us and that we have that truth in us. And our parents at any time could have decided, I don't give a shit what it does to me. I don't give a shit what people think of me. I'm going to go to my child and acknowledge what I did because I see them struggling with the outcomes of what I did. Anything that makes my child's life better so that they know that I'm connected to them and I love them, I'm going to do that. They could have done that at any time. And you can pretend that they can't, but they clearly are able to make incremental steps. They're clearly able to make incremental steps with other people and with other siblings. So what people like me, so if you're the person with complex PTSD and you've been gaslit by society and gaslit by your therapist, God forbid, and well-meaning people who say things like, well, you know, they did the best they could. I'm sure they really did love you. Maybe try to connect to that, blah, 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 blah. In your head, you need to tell them to shut the fuck up. Because you have a knowing and a truth in you. And that knowing and that truth is, no, they fucking didn't. Because there's the alcoholic father over here who fought and fought and fought to mitigate the damage his alcoholism did to his kids. And his kids can see it and they can feel it and they know it. And the alcoholic father over here didn't. All he did is make excuses, make it about him. Every time he reconnected, it was about some bullshit like, I really am trying and you have to understand, blah, blah, blah. He's not fucking trying because he doesn't love his kids. He's not fucking trying. He loves alcohol more than he loves his kids. And you can say, oh, it's this horrible disease. You know, no, I know it is. I spent years in treatment. I know it's fucking horrible. You think my PTSD didn't factor into how I did things that hurt my daughter? It did, but it's not a fucking excuse and it doesn't help her heal. And if someday she's in therapy and she needs someone to come in and say, this happened when you were 2 and you probably don't remember, and it's my fault. I'm the one who did it. I'm not going to go, oh, PTSD, and if you shut the fuck up, that doesn't help her. If I love her, I want to help her. And she needs to know, and she needs to be fucking angry at me. And if she hates me and cuts me off, then that's what needs to happen, because I love her. Because I actually love her. Not these douchebags who use their mental health issues to string their kids out their entire life, pretending I really do want to, and I'm trying, and if you understood what I'd lived through, and oh my God, like I'm trying as hard as I can, and you just don't leave any open. Yeah, your kids don't leave any opening because they know you're full of shit. You know you're full of shit. You know you like alcohol more than you like your kids. Okay, this is not just about alcohol. This is any excuse of anxiety or PTSD or ADHD or being on the spectrum or whatever. So I'm gonna say it again. I'm gonna close with this. I'm talking to those of you who were abused and gaslit, but then who watched your parents make incremental improvements in relationship to other people and in relationship maybe to your siblings, but make no change in relationship to you. Because in the end, admitting what they did to you is more uncomfortable than allowing themselves to not love you. Admitting the comfort they feel in lying about what they did to you is more important to them than loving you. The comfort they get from lying about what they did is more important to them than loving you, because they don't love you. One more time. The comfort they feel in lying about what they did to you is more important than expressing or working on loving you, because they don't love you. And there's a lot of grief to work through. And it stops being complicated. It stops being about psychological theories. It stops being about DSM diagnoses, blah, blah, blah. And it becomes about the simple truth. You had parents who didn't love you. And you need to work through that, and you need to square with that. But I can tell you, guys, here's the good news. Once you admit that and work through it, you can forgive your parents as humans. You can understand them better. But it also frees you from the last final anchor that holds you in grief, PTSD, depression, anxiety, shame. Because every time you try to pretend that your parents did love you, unconsciously you have to assign blame to yourself for these mental health struggles that you have. If you were the sort of person who was able to receive the love like your siblings did, you wouldn't have as severe of mental health. It's a fucking lie. It's bullshit. Just admit and deal with the fact that your parents didn't love you. My parents didn't love me in any significant way. They made incremental changes their entire lives to improve their parenting, but it was more comfortable for them to lie about what they did to me, even if that destroyed my life and destroyed my relationship to my siblings. That comfort was more important to them than creating connection with me and healing after what they had done. That is not the act of someone who loves their child. That's the act of someone who doesn't love that child. Okay? Complex PTSD, folks. Don't let society gaslight you. Don't let a therapist gaslight you. If your parents made incremental improvements and became much better at being loving or connected to other people in the community, other kids, or to other people in your family or siblings or nieces and nephews, my my father was a great uncle to my cousins, or I think he was. Kind, attended to them, took care of them, visited them, talked to them, listened to them, right? If you watched your parents do that, and they didn't do it with you, and they just said, well, you were a difficult child, you were not a difficult child. It is a simple, fuck all of the psychological jargon, the DSM-5, set it to the side. It's a simple truth that's extremely painful to deal with. They don't love you. And that's okay. Because if you can work through that grief and that trauma of not being loved by your parent, you will be freed of the last anchor that holds you in that web of lies that makes you somehow responsible for why your parents treat you the way they do or why they did. If you can work through that grief, it will free you from the last and the heaviest anchor that holds you in that web of lies that makes you responsible for them not loving you. Okay? Freedom is on the other side. Now I want to tell you a last thing. So now we're going to transition to the spiritual. As a human, I love you. You are my people. As a human, I love you. And you are loved by life. It might seem like life abused you, but it didn't. Society abused you, beliefs abused you, lies abused you. Your parents abused you, your siblings abused you. Life did not. Life was seeking to express through you this entire time. And if you can let go of that last anchor, and just admit that your parents didn't love you, you will receive the blessing of knowing that life itself loves you at a profound level and seeks to express through you. Okay? Let go of that last anchor, the lie that your parents loved you. They didn't. Mourn it, move through it, and know that I love you and that life itself loves you at a profound level and seeks to express through you at a profound level. And the only thing that has blocked it has been the lies, the abuse, the lies that you internalized. And if you can let go of those lies about you and admit there's nothing about you that made your parents not love you. They decided to do that because it was convenient for them and they don't love you. You'll be freed to love yourself and to allow life to express through you because it loves you. Okay, that's my message for the day. I love you guys. I'll see you next time. Take care.
Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.